I'm excited to be here today with Rew Dickinson. He's one of the best storytellers and one of the best instructors of storytelling. He has the unique perspective of having been both an account executive and a sales engineer. Rew, do you mind giving us a quick intro into some of the roles you've held and what you're doing now?
Yep, happy to, Deirdre. Engineer by trade. I have done pretty much every go-to-market role. So sales engineering, and consulting. And now I run a global sales training company called Alpha Go-to-Market. We train sales teams, pre-sales teams, CS teams, my background, for companies all over the world. It's primarily focused on storytelling and those sort of consultative sales skills.
Excellent. And you also do sales kickoffs too.
Yeah, sales kickoffs, QBRs, team events, that kind of thing. Most of our training is virtual, just given the world we live in, but I do a lot of SKOs, a lot of travel for that.
You're an expert in the art of storytelling, and you're a thought leader on the topic. But we know everything doesn't always go to plan. Can you tell me about one of your storytelling fails and how you recovered? And how has that shaped the way you incorporate storytelling today and train others on the topic?
All right, where do you begin with this one? Yeah, my background's in sales, and I was in a meeting. Actually, I was working on a sales engagement with Daimler Truck. I was in Portland, Oregon, so it was with Daimler Trucks North America, and I was in Portland. We had a meeting. I was primarily working with the IT team on some software that was going to help them move a little bit more quickly in IT. So I'll never forget, we were getting ready for this meeting, and I had secured a meeting with the CIO. So my champion was there. He was a IT manager at Daimler. And before the meeting, I'm going and I'm thinking, all right, I got to get my story slot dialed in, right? So I'm thinking about all the stories that we're going to go and tell, and I come up with a few of them. And for those who don't know, Daimler is also Mercedes, and so they're really big on racing and Formula One and that kind of thing. So I'm thinking to myself, great, well, I've got Pirelli as a customer story, as a use case. And so, performance tire manufacturer with a performance company with Daimler Mercedes. And so we ended up getting in the meeting, and I tell this story and a couple other stories. And then after the meeting, close the door, my champion's still in there. And my champion goes, Rew, really? I'm like, what's wrong, right? He goes, Pirelli, they make tires. We make trucks that take months to make. And I'm thinking to myself, ooh, I messed that one up. So it was a very humbling experience, we'll put it that way. But it kind of shaped my thought on storytelling, which is, you've all seen this where folks will come in with the wrong story given the audience. And look, it's hard if you're in sales or pre-sales because you don't always have all the same stories that are super applicable to that customer's industry. But if you don't have that, the lesson learned is you need to say that up front. Otherwise, when you've got a company that manufactures elite vehicles, I mean, these things that you see driving down the highway, these 18-wheelers, they're precision manufactured. And there's a lot of pride that goes into that. And when you come in with an example of a tire company and try to compare that to a company that manufactures these huge vehicles, it's not a great look. So the lesson learned is really know the audience. And if you're going to tell a use case that's not exactly applicable, make sure that you spend some time setting expectations before you get into that. Long story short, we recovered. We had a good relationship there, so it turned out all right. But I wish I didn't go down that route.
I love that example, and thank you for sharing it because it's so real. Sometimes we don't have the exact match of a story, right, for a particular
Yeah,
industry. In just setting the context up front, hey, I know these are tires, but, right, or, just that context and helping, like one
yeah,
sentence before that story
absolutely.
would have made all the difference.
You bet.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, how about a storytelling fail that you've watched, but you haven't actually delivered yourself? And
Yeah.
we can keep names anonymous.
This is really timely because I've been doing a lot of SKOs, and you see a lot of this, and I've actually, in a lot of my SKO training, if the topic is storytelling, I will bring up some of the biggest fails. So there's typically three of them. One is it'll just be way too long of a story. And you all know this. They'll tell you, a story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not in a sales meeting. In a sales meeting, you got to get through that thing as quickly as possible. So you don't have people's attention for very long. That's one thing I've seen a lot of, is just the stories that go on forever. The other thing that I'll see a lot of is you'll hear these stories, but I talk about this in some of my online training, and just if you follow me on LinkedIn, there's no journey from one thing to another thing. So that you'll see these stories about, oh, well, we increased operational efficiency by 20%, or we reduced time to hire by 37%. And the human brain just has a really hard time understanding what that means, a 37% reduction. But if you went and said something like, well, this used to take 5 days to hire, and now it takes 3 days to hire or 4 days to hire, people can imagine what it's like to get a day back in their life. So that is a very, very common one I see, where they tell this story and it's just this point in time stat. It's a certain percentage. And that's another real big fail. And then the last one you see is just, you get to the story and you're like, is this story about a customer, or is this story just about how great your company is? And how many times have we seen that, right? The hero is the company. So those are the three big fails that I see all the time.
What are the skills a solutions or sales professional needs to have when they're just starting out?
There's 4 key skills you need to sell. We call these the core 4 at Alpha Go-to-Market. I'll draw them up for you. You've got number 1, knowledge of the actual product and your customer's industry. Number 2, you've got to speak clearly and concisely. So this is communication. 3, you need discovery skills. And lastly, you need leadership. And this is the most important, because customers don't know exactly where they're going. They are in a meeting with you because they have a problem and they don't necessarily know how to solve it. If they did know how to solve it, they probably wouldn't be in a meeting with you. They probably would have been doing what they need to get done. So these are the core 4 skills that you need, just baseline, to be a salesperson. The difference between a consultant or subject matter expert and a salesperson is salespeople and sales engineers, they have all of these things. Other folks, they just have the knowledge. And you see that where folks come in and when they're just an engineer and they just have the knowledge, they're not as effective. So those are kind of the baseline skills. Whenever I walk into an organization, I'm trying to identify and assess, where are we strong and where are we weak? And the more sort of technical the team is, or the more you just look at the founders. If it's a technical founder, they're usually loaded with this. They're not as strong in these areas. So that's what I'm looking for when I walk into an organization, because those are the core 4 skills you need to sell anything.
How about when they've mastered those core 4? What are the skills that they need to get to that next level to be, a good storyteller?
Yeah, the most important one is really understanding your buyer, which sounds cliche, and like everybody will tell you that they understand their buyer. But if you've ever sold into one of these, if you've ever sold for a company that sells into multiple industries and they're selling to multiple departments or buyer personas within that industry or those industries, that is a really, really hard sale, because now you're going from not just one product to one person, but you're going many products or many solutions to many different people. So how the heck do you understand and know everything about every buyer? That is something that in the past took literally years to develop that skill. I mean, I've been selling for 10, 15 years, and I'm still learning a ton about all the different industries that I go and sell to. But if you can know your buyer really, really well, The most important thing about a story is the problem or the problematic current state that that customer is in, because that, when you nail that, it makes your solution look like the vehicle that's going to get them to a better place. If you're not good about understanding what that problem is, then it's a fail. You miss it. So that next level in storytelling is either having the experience and really understanding the buyer, or, I mean, you can use some tools right now. I mean, ChatGPT is really good for helping you understand a little bit more of this stuff. But there's no substitute for just going out, interviewing a buyer and asking them, hey, what are the key things that are a huge issue for you? And then you take that and you repeat it in the next meeting with that same buyer persona. And people think, oh my gosh, he just read my mind. No, I just talked to the other person that's exactly like you. So that knowing the buyer is the most important thing. And I just see this is why marketing stories don't usually hit if a salesperson just takes the marketing story and tries to communicate it, because they're just not knowledgeable of the buyer.
Love that. We're really big on making sure that the research is done and that you, as a seller and a solutions professional, you're creating a point of view, right? You have to bring some value. You have to truly understand the problem they're trying to solve.
Mhm.
Love it. So, once they're a good storyteller, what are the skills they need to be a great storyteller? What is it that sets the experts apart?
So I got a good friend who is a CISO. He was recently at one of the fastest growing companies, private companies. And we were talking about how he does advisory for cybersecurity firms. So he said when he's coaching these cybersecurity companies, these startups, he says, you have 12 seconds to get my attention and show me the problem that you solve and how life is going to be better after you fix that problem for me. And he said, the real skill is your ability to go and create contrast, which is the same language that I use when I'm talking about storytelling. So the expert storytellers are good at creating contrast between the situation that someone is in right now and where you can take them. And I'll give you an
Mhm.
example here. I just used this example in another training that I did. If I asked you, Deirdre, if you would like to take a shower at 65 degrees or jump in a swimming pool at 65 degrees, or I don't know, what's that, like 18 Celsius, you would probably say, heck no, right? It's really cold.
Probably. Yep.
However, if I had before that told you that you were in an ice bath at 33 degrees and you went to 65 degrees, that's going to feel amazing to you.
You
The
got it.
same way, if I had put you in a hot tub and then brought you back to the 65, it's going to sound miserable. So, where this goes and what great storytellers are good at is the product itself, that 65-degree swimming pool or shower, you can make that feel incredible if you're good at showing people a prior situation where they're in a 33-degree pool, or you can make it feel miserable if they were just in a hot tub. So the skill for those expert storytellers is to create that contrast. And the way that you do that is through asking the right questions to figure out where someone is on that spectrum. Also telling stories of other similar customers to help them position themselves before you actually talk about the product and the value of the future state that you're going to bring someone to. But creating that contrast, that's the hardest thing that a lot of people don't do a great job of, because it's hard. A lot of folks don't want to tell you their problems, and they also don't want to give you enough time for discovery in a sales meeting.
Good point. I love the way you succinctly described that because it's very clear. I know a lot of sellers and solution professionals, they're trying to create a vision, right? So they're they're doing things like not using those statistics, but they're saying go from 5 days to 1 day,
Yeah,
but they're not adding that level of contrast.
that's it. The contrast is where it's at.
What is one of the biggest misconceptions about storytelling?
So there are several. Storytelling is a huge, huge topic. And I just got off a call with someone where basically you can categorize storytelling within kind of the go-to-market world as two types. There's the marketing, there's the keynote speech, there's the Steve Jobs storytelling that you would want to go and give at a trade show where there's an audience and there's no interaction. And then there's the I'm in a sales meeting and it's me and you one-on-one, or it's me and my sales engineer and maybe 3 or 4 other people from the client. And that's a very different storytelling conversation than I'm going to give you a keynote speech and go and bring you through things. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that all of these storytelling frameworks that you see within keynote speeches are applicable to sales, and they're not, because you don't have 60 minutes to go uninterrupted and take someone through a story. You've got 12 seconds to keep people's attention and create a conversation. So one of the big misconceptions is that we're trying to go and tell stories like these Disney stories or these keynote speech stories in sales. And it's just very, very different if you've done that role before. So that's a big area where I just see people try to apply these same concepts and it just doesn't land. It's the long, boring stories.
What is something that you were taught about storytelling, either in a classroom setting or by a mentor or leader, that didn't work out for you in the real world?
I've studied a lot of storytelling. I've done improv. I've done storytelling there. You also see a lot of folks posting about it. You hear people talking about it on LinkedIn. And there are some of these universal formulas, such as the Disney storytelling formula or the Pixar storytelling formula. And these really aren't applicable to sales. So there's those ones. And then you have improv, where it's like 7 parts: rising action, climax, falling action. And again, this is great if you're giving a keynote speech or a long form thing, or you have 2 hours to put together a film, but many of them really just don't apply. So I'd say a lot of the lessons around storytelling, there's a couple of concepts that may apply, like creating contrast and having a hero's journey. However, most of the stuff is just not applicable in a sales realm. And if you try to use it, you're probably going to bore some people.
So, Rew, when you think about AEs and SEs collaborating together on a sales call, do you have any tips or best practices for the way that they should incorporate stories?
Yeah. So my recommendation there is to have the AE come up with a slide deck of around 45 slides and then go through and show that and then say, okay, I'm going to now hand it off to my technical resource for 5 minutes left to go and give the demo and then tune out. I'm kidding on that. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity in a sales meeting for the AE and the SE to collaborate, and the best teams are really good at this. So anybody that's been an SE knows how stressful it can be to go through where you really need to know everything about the product and how you're going to click and everything that you're going to go and guide someone through. And that's a really stressful situation. Now, the best AEs can do a really good job of layering in additional value as the SE is going through their demo. So when I've seen this done the best, the AE may start off with an intro. It's short, but then they will pass it to the SE for the demo. The problem there is that if the SC doesn't have time to come up for air and rethink their next thing, they tend to get in a situation where they've got 10 minutes of uninterrupted speech. And that's not good if you're trying to create a conversation.
Mhm.
So when I've seen it done really well, the SE will incorporate storytelling into their presentation of the technology, and then the AE will layer in customer stories. So let's give you an example. You're working with let's say you're selling to an engineering team. You're selling to developers, and you're on the phone. You're actually in this meeting with a head of IT or a CIO. You're talking to them, and before you even get into the features, you're talking about the typical problems that they're facing in their day-to-day. And so you're creating basically a problem and creating contrast between what life is going to look like afterwards. So you're kind of bringing them into this ditch or this pit, if you will. You then go and demonstrate the software and how you can go and help the customer achieve what they want, which is to not be sitting there having business go and throwing them more and more requests for IT help and that kind of thing. And then you show them the product and you bring them to this better future state. So basically current state, future state, you move them up here. If at that point, after the SC has gone through a demo for maybe 2-3 minutes of walking them through that, if the AE can come in and layer in a customer story right afterwards and then start the questioning, that makes for a really interactive scenario. So where I look for SCs to do stories is tell the story of the problems that this is solving for customers, and then have the AE come in and give real examples of customers who have used the technology to solve that problem. And then it's the double whammy, because the
Mhm.
customer you will usually get it if the SE does a good job, but then they're really bought in once the AE goes and layers on the customer story.
So true. And when that's done well, it works so good. Love it. Rue, I recently saw a post that you had on LinkedIn about how you walked into a coffee shop and on the menu was an item that you weren't used to seeing.
This was a aha moment for me, being on the other side of a story and being sold. So I'll give you the rundown here. I had done a bunch of work, wanted to pop over to one of my local favorite coffee shops here. It's Gather 256. And I go there, and it was just for some afternoon work. And I'm looking at the menu, and it happened to be restaurant week. So I look down at the menu, and there's this thing written on it, and I'm saying, "What is this?" And I'll write it up here just so it's clear for folks. And I normally go and I get the Cuban
Yes.
panini, but they didn't have the Cuban panini anymore. And they had one of these things.
This
And I'm thinking,
this
I don't even know how to say that. Well, it's croque madame. It's a French dish. So I didn't know that at the time. But I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I don't know what that is. And then the lady behind the counter, M, goes to me and she's like, "Oh, were you thinking about the croque madame?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure. I don't know what it is." And then she says, "It's written up on the board over there." So I read it, and it's a bunch of French cheeses and ingredients. So I still don't understand it entirely. So M goes to me, "Oh, well, it's kind of like a fancy ham and cheese sandwich with an egg on top." I said, "Oh, that sounds awesome, right?" So at that point, I was interested in the croque madame, but I wasn't ready to make the purchase because I often will go with just something simple like the cinnamon bun. It's easier, right? So now I understand the croque madame what it is, but I'm not sure if I want it. Then M just crushes it with a customer story, and it happens to be her own story. And so M goes, "Yeah, it's one of my favorite things on the menu. It's fantastic." Now, what is going on here? M is just like a sales engineer where she took a very complicated concept, a French dish, and she simplified it and made it a fancy ham and cheese sandwich with an egg on top. Now, most sales engineers will stop there. And then the customer says, "Okay, that's cool. I get it." But they're not yet ready to make the next step, because what will put people over the edge is knowing that other people have already done that before, have already purchased it before. So this is where it's so valuable, whether you're a sales engineer or a sales rep, to explain your software simply, but then go and give the proof, the social proof that other people have used it and gotten value out of it. And that's exactly what M did when she said, I've used it and I got a ton of value out of it. And by used it, I mean ate it. But that was just when she did that, I walked by afterwards. I walk upstairs. I said, oh my gosh, you just stole me with the things that I teach, which is storytelling.
I love that one. And it's so simple that anyone can understand it. And to me, when I read that, I was like, or watched that, I was immediately understood that social proof is oftentimes missing. As we wrap up, what final advice would you give about the art of storytelling?
My best advice on storytelling is to go watch South Park. I'm not even kidding. So when you look at South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone are some of the best storytellers. And there's actually a YouTube video out there about this. If you watch a South Park show, everything does a really good job of having cause and effect. And it creates a lot of drama, as you can imagine from a South Park show. And it also keeps everybody's attention. So their big thing is between every scene, there should be some sort of but or cause or effect or therefore. And I'll just give you an example. There was one a number of years back where they were upset that there were a bunch of kids who weren't able to pay attention in school because they were sitting through classroom where it would be 75-minute lectures and you're a kid and you're supposed to be sitting in your seat. So they thought that this was a problem and they started diagnosing the entire town with ADHD. So everyone ends up having to get on Ritalin, the drug at the time. I think this was before Adderall. So everybody's on Ritalin. And everybody is a zombie at this point because it's just desensitized them. So then they realize, oh, shoot, everybody is desensitized. Everybody's a zombie. Now we need to go and get everyone on Riddle Out. And it's just a hilarious example here. But when you see what South Park does is they create a scene and then they go, there's some sort of but something happens, like everybody turns into a zombie. And then there's another thing, but something else happens. And it creates this drama and this back and forth. So my best advice is watch South Park or other short form storytelling as opposed to long form film. And you'll get better at storytelling and keeping people's attention during sales meetings.
Great advice. I love that. Thanks, Rew.
Thank you, Deirdre.